What if everything you thought you knew about Babylon was only half the story? This ancient city, shrouded in myth and legend, holds secrets far stranger than the Hanging Gardens or Hammurabi's code secrets that defy what our history books taught us. Picture a place where astronomers mapped the stars with eerie precision, thousands of years before telescopes existed, where mathematicians cracked complex equations using a base 60 system that still shapes how we tell time today. Babylon wasn't just a kingdom of grand monuments and laws carved in stone. It was a cradle of innovation, a labyrinth of untold stories waiting to unravel. Think about this. Beneath the dust of millennia lies evidence of a civilization that pioneered everything from early medicine to urban planning. Yet so much of their world remains hidden in plain sight. Ever heard of the Devil's Tower, a mysterious ziggurat rumored to be a portal to another realm? Or the fact that Babylon's Ishtar Gate wasn't just blue, it shimmered with a glaze made from crushed gemstones, a spectacle meant to awe even the gods. These aren't just footnotes in history, they're whispers of a people who bent the boundaries of possibility. So why don't we talk about these astonishing feats more often? Maybe because the truth is stranger and far more fascinating than the simplified versions we've been handed. Today, we're peeling back the layers of time to reveal 25 jaw-dropping facts about Babylon that'll make you see this ancient wonder in a whole new light. From their bizarre love of fortune-telling eels to the hidden codes in their art, you're about to discover why this city was more than just a dot on a map. It was a beating heart of human ingenuity, and its echoes are still with us, ready to step into the shadows of history. Let's begin. But before it was Babylon, the city had another name, one that cracks open its true identity like a code hidden in plain sight. The Akkadians called it Babylon, meaning Gate of the Gods, a title that wasn't just poetic flair but a direct claim to divine connection. Imagine standing at the edge of this ancient metropolis thousands of years ago, hearing traders whisper its name as if it were a password to the heavens. Even earlier, Sumerian tablets referred to it as Kadingara, a nod to its sacred role as a bridge between earth and the realm of deities. This wasn't just a rebranding. The shift from Babylon to Babylon mirrored the city's rise from a modest settlement to a cosmic crossroads. The Akkadian language, with its rolling syllables, shaped the name we know today, but the roots dive deeper. Some linguists trace Babylon to an even older phrase meaning the scattering, hinting at the legendary Tower of Babel story centuries before it was written. Think about that, a city so influential, its very name became tangled with humanity's oldest myths. And here's the twist: early Sumerian texts barely mention Babylon at all. It wasn't until the reign of Sargon of Akkad, around 2400 years before the Common Era, that the city began flickering into historical view. Like a star gradually brightening in the dawn sky, Babylon's name evolved alongside its power. So next time you say Babylon, remember, you're not just naming a place. You're invoking a gateway, one that ancient people believed could swing open to let the gods walk among them. The biblical Tower of Babel wasn't just a cautionary tale. It was likely inspired by a real structure towering over Babylon's skyline, the enigmatic ziggurat. This massive stepped pyramid, dedicated to the god Marduk, wasn't just a temple, it was a cosmic staircase. Ancient texts describe it with a base as wide as a modern football field, its 7 tiers painted in vibrant colors symbolizing the planets. At the top, a shrine where priests tracked celestial movements with an accuracy that would have seemed supernatural to outsiders. Herodotus, the Greek historian who visited Babylon in the 5th century before the Common Era, wrote of a tower of great height where priests performed rituals no commoner could witness. His accounts align eerily with cuneiform tablets detailing Etemenanke's construction right down to the baked bricks and bitumen mortar. But here's where myth and reality collide. While the Bible framed the tower as humanity's hubristic attempt to reach heaven, Babylonians saw it as a bridge between realms. Their astronomers used its height to predict eclipses and plot Venus's cycles, embedding celestial math into its very design. The irony, the ziggurat's ruins might have birthed the confusion of tongues legend. After Babylon's fall, travelers encountered workers from across the empire hauling bricks, each speaking different languages to rebuild it. That cacophony of dialects could have morphed into the story we know today. So was the Tower of Babel real, not as a single doomed project, but as a living, breathing scientific instrument that became so legendary, its true purpose was lost in translation. The walls of Babylon weren't just barriers, they were a statement in stone, engineered to defy both enemies and time itself. Stretching over 10 miles in length, the city's fortifications featured not one, not two, but 3 concentric layers of defenses, each more formidable than the last. The innermost wall alone was so thick, 25 feet of solid baked brick, that ancient historians claimed 2 chariots could race side by side atop it without touching. Picture that, a roadway in the sky wide enough for thunderous horse-drawn processions, all while guards patrolled below in shadowed tunnels designed to funnel invaders into deadly traps. Nebuchadnezzar II didn't just build these walls, he weaponized propaganda with them. Inscriptions boasting of their invincibility were carved into the very bricks, declaring, "I surrounded Babylon with a mighty wall that no enemy could breach." But here's what makes that more than royal bragging. Modern excavations reveal the walls were lined with bitumen, a tar-like substance that acted as ancient shock absorption, making them resistant to battering rams. Even more clever, the outer moat wasn't just filled with water. It was a calculated labyrinth of canals that could be diverted to flood approaching armies, turning the desert into a weapon. Yet the real genius lay in the psychological warfare. The Ishtar Gate, with its cobalt blue glazed tiles and golden reliefs of dragons, wasn't just an entrance, it was a threshold designed to humble visitors before they even set foot inside. Attackers approaching those walls wouldn't just face physical barriers, they'd be dwarfed by towering symbols of divine protection, a reminder that Babylon's gods stood guard. And for centuries it worked, until the unthinkable happened and the walls, like all human boasts, met their match in history's relentless tide. But that's another story. The Ishtar Gate wasn't just a monument, it was a symphony in blue, a hypnotic display of craftsmanship designed to manipulate light itself. Every cobalt brick shimmered with crushed lapis lazuli, a pigment so rare it traveled thousands of miles from Afghanistan's mines to reach Babylon. But this wasn't merely about opulence, the blue was a language. In Mesopotamian cosmology, lapis mirrored the night sky, a celestial canvas for the goddess Ishtar, who ruled both war and Venus, the morning star. Walk through that gate and you weren't just entering a city, you were stepping into the heavens. Archaeologists recently discovered the glaze contained more than just crushed gemstones. Microscopic traces of gold dust were mixed into the mortar, catching sunlight at precise angles to make the gate appear to pulse like a living thing at dawn and dusk. Imagine standing before it as an ancient traveler, the tiles shifting from deep indigo to luminous turquoise as the sun moved, as if the goddess herself were breathing life into the walls. Even the dragons and bulls adorning the gate weren't static art. Their enameled scales changed hue depending on the viewer's position, creating the illusion of movement. The genius of this color code went deeper than spectacle. Cuneiform tablets reveal priests timed ceremonies to celestial events, ensuring the gate's brilliance peaked during Ishtar's sacred festivals. When Venus rose brightest in the sky, the gate's glow reached its zenith, a man-made star reflecting the divine. This wasn't decoration, it was architecture as ritual, stone and glaze engineered to collapse the boundary between earth and sky. And today, when you see reconstructions in museums, that blue still holds one last secret. Modern scientists can't perfectly replicate its luminosity because the Babylonians used a lost formula. blending not just lapis but ground pearls and a mystery ingredient that made their blue outshine the Mediterranean Sea. Long before paper or digital transactions existed, Babylonians were banking with clay. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of cuneiform tablets from around 2,000 years before the Common Era, not just recording loans but detailing interest rates, repayment schedules, and even penalties for late payments. These weren't simple IOUs, they were sophisticated financial contracts pressed into wet clay with the precision of legal documents, then baked solid as stone. One tablet from the reign of Hammurabi lists a loan of 5 shekels of silver with an astonishingly modern caveat. If the borrower defaulted, the interest would double. What makes these tablets revolutionary isn't just their existence, it's how they mirror today's banking practices. Each transaction included witness signatures, just like a notarized document, and was often sealed in an envelope of clay with the terms repeated on the outside. Break the seal and you'd see the original agreement inside, untouched. Some tablets even functioned like savings passbooks, tracking multiple deposits over years with compounded interest calculated monthly. The Babylonians used a base 60 numerical system, which is why we still divide hours into 60 minutes and circles into 360 degrees, but they also applied it to finance, with interest rates often set at 20% annually, a standard that persisted for centuries. The real twist, these tablets were more than receipts, they were a form of early credit scoring. Default on a loan, and word would spread through the merchant networks, making future borrowing nearly impossible. Meanwhile, diligent borrowers could leverage their clay records to secure larger loans, much like a modern credit history. Even more remarkable, some tablets reveal women engaging in these transactions independently, challenging assumptions about ancient gender roles. So the next time you deposit a check or check your bank balance, remember, you're participating in a system that began with Babylonian fingers pressing numbers into wet clay 4,000 years ago. Buried beneath the sands of time, a single clay tablet shatters our assumptions about ancient geography, the Babylonian world map carved over 2,600 years ago. This isn't just the oldest known map, it's a window into how Babylonians saw their universe. At first glance, it looks fantastical. A flat disk floating in a cosmic ocean, ringed by mythical rivers where serpents coil and gods whisper. But zoom in and you'll spot Babylon deliberately centered not as arrogance but as cosmic truth. Their civilization was the axis on which the world turned. The map's most striking feature, the Bitter River, a serpentine band encircling the earth like a moat. To modern eyes, it's pure mythology, but to Babylonians, this was science. They believed saltwater surrounded all lands, fed by the primordial Abzu, the underground freshwater ocean that nourished the roots of the world. 7 triangular islands dot the river's outer edge, labeled "Where the Sun is Not Seen," a chilling reference to realms beyond human reach. One even bears the inscription 6 double hours of daylight, hinting at an early understanding of latitude, yet the real revelation lies in what's missing. The map shows no trace of Greece, Egypt, or even neighboring Elam, not because Babylon didn't know of them, but because this wasn't meant for navigation. It was a theological blueprint, a guide to humanity's place in the cosmos. The cuneiform text on the back confirms it, describing the chaos beyond the river as home to winged beasts and scorpion men. This wasn't cartography as we know it, it was a sacred diagram proving that to Babylon, geography and mythology weren't separate disciplines, they were 2 sides of the same clay tablet. Modern archaeologists once dismissed it as primitive until they noticed something startling. The Euphrates River curves exactly where satellite imagery confirms it did in the 6th century before the Common Era. Even the city of Ur is positioned with eerie accuracy. The Babylonians could map what they knew with precision, they simply chose to frame it within a grander, divine narrative. So while we see a world map, they saw a him in clay, a reminder that every river, every mountain was a stroke in the god's masterpiece. While kings like Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar dominate history books, Babylon's true power brokers often wore crowns of a different design, its formidable queens. Take Adad Guppy, the mother of King Nabonidus, who didn't just whisper advice from the shadows. She ruled outright as regent for nearly a decade while her son campaigned abroad. Cuneiform tablets reveal she didn't merely keep the throne warm. She issued decrees, presided over temple ceremonies, and even negotiated with foreign dignitaries as Babylon's sovereign. At 80 years old, this iron-willed matriarch commanded more respect than most kings, with scribes referring to her as the woman who makes the land prosper. Her influence didn't stop at politics. Adad Guppy reshaped Babylon's religious landscape, reviving worship of the moon god Sin after centuries of neglect. When Nabonidus finally returned, he didn't reverse her reforms, he enshrined them, proof of her unshakable authority. But she wasn't alone. Earlier records speak of Queen Semiramis, a figure so legendary her exploits blurred into myth. Greek historians like Herodotus claimed she built Babylon's Hanging Gardens, though modern scholars debate this, while Babylonian texts credit her with constructing the city's first aqueducts, engineering marvels that funneled water from the Euphrates to every district. What made these women so exceptional wasn't just their political savvy, but how they leveraged piety as power. Adad Guppy's devotion to Sin wasn't mere spirituality. It was a calculated move to unite fractious priestly factions under her influence. Meanwhile, Queen Nitocris, mentioned in both Babylonian and Greek chronicles, allegedly avenged her husband's murder by inviting his killers to a banquet in a sealed hall, then diverting the Euphrates to drown them all. Whether fact or folklore, these stories reveal a truth often glossed over. Babylon's queens operated with a ruthlessness and vision that rivaled any king's. The real shocker, some tablets suggest royal daughters inherited property independently, a right unimaginable in later civilizations. A legal document from Sippar details a princess gifting land to her daughter without male oversight, while another shows Queen Pujuhepa of the neighboring Hittites, who married into Babylon's court, corresponding as an equal with Egyptian pharaohs. This wasn't token authority, it was systemic. From diplomacy to infrastructure, Babylon's queens left fingerprints on history. Yet their legacies were often erased, their names scratched off monuments by successors uneasy with female power. Today, as archaeologists piece together their stories from fragmented tablets, one truth emerges. Behind every great king stood a greater queen, rewriting history one decree at a time. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, legendary enough to be called one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, might never have hung over Babylon at all. For centuries, historians assumed these lush terraces cascaded somewhere near the Euphrates, but here's the twist: not a single Babylonian text mentions them. Not one. Meanwhile, Assyrian records from Nineveh, 300 miles north, describe King Sennacherib's palace gardens in exacting detail: terraced orchards, aqueducts pumping water uphill, even exotic plants shipped from distant lands. The descriptions match the gardens of legend so precisely that archaeologists now question everything we thought we knew. Dive into the evidence and it gets even stranger. Greek historians like Strabo and Diodorus Siculus placed the gardens firmly in Babylon, yet their accounts were written centuries after the fact, hearsay passed down like a game of ancient telephone. Meanwhile, Sennacherib's own prism inscriptions boast of engineering feats straight out of the garden's mythos. Bronze screws lifting water to dizzying heights, vaulted terraces shaded by grapevines. His palace at Nineveh even had an elaborate system of canals and dams, precisely the kind of infrastructure needed to sustain such a marvel. And here's the clincher: recent excavations at Nineveh uncovered the remains of an enormous aqueduct, its stone blocks inscribed with Sennacherib's name, designed to carry water to where else? His royal gardens, so why the mix-up? Blame poetic license. When the Persians sacked Nineveh in 612 before the Common Era, survivors fled south to Babylon, possibly carrying tales of those breathtaking gardens with them. Over time, the story latched onto Babylon's grandeur instead. Even more telling, Babylonian soil, sandy and porous, would have struggled to support such lavish vegetation without constant irrigation, whereas Nineveh's richer earth and mountain springs made it an ideal location. The kicker, Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon's most famous king and the garden's supposed builder, never mentioned them in his extensive records. Not a single brick, not a single inscription. Yet the mystery deepens. Some scholars argue the gardens could have existed in both cities, that Sennacherib's design inspired a smaller replica in Babylon. Others suggest the Greeks, dazzled by Babylon's ruins, conflated two distinct wonders. Whatever the truth, the real scandal isn't just about geography. It's about how easily history gets rewritten, how legends eclipse facts, and how even the most iconic stories can crumble under scrutiny. So next time you picture those verdant terraces, imagine them not under Babylon's sun, but nestled in Nineveh's hills, a marvel misplaced by time, waiting to be reclaimed. The night sky over Babylon wasn't just a canvas of stars. It was a celestial clockwork, meticulously divided into 12 equal slices that still shape how we read the cosmos today. While modern horoscopes might seem like pop psychology, their roots stretch back to Babylonian astrologers who tracked planetary movements with astonishing precision. These ancient sky watchers didn't just gaze upward, they mapped the heavens into a 12-part grid, each section tied to specific constellations, laying the foundation for the zodiac we recognize. But here's what textbooks often miss. Their system wasn't about personality traits, it was a survival tool. Clay tablets from the 5th century before the Common Era reveal how priests used the zodiac to predict seasonal floods, royal fortunes, and even crop yields. The constellation Leo, for instance, wasn't a symbol of bravery but a signal that the Euphrates would soon overflow its banks. Virgo's rise marked barley harvest time, while Scorpio's appearance warned of incoming sandstorms. This was astrology as agricultural almanac, a fusion of astronomy and practicality that Greek scholars later adapted into the more familiar personality-based system. The genius of their method lay in its mathematical rigor. By dividing the ecliptic, the sun's apparent path, into 12 30-degree segments, the Babylonians created a framework so enduring that even NASA uses it today for celestial navigation. Their star catalogues, etched onto cuneiform tablets, pinpointed planetary positions WITH Chinese letter 2 degrees, a feat unmatched for millennia. One tablet, currently in the British Museum, even corrects an earlier calculation of Venus's orbit, proof they peer-reviewed their work like modern scientists. Why 12 divisions? Blame their base 60 number system, which made 12 an ideal fraction. But there's a deeper layer, each sign correlated to 1 month of their lunar calendar, syncing earthly rhythms with cosmic cycles. When Greek astronomer Ptolemy later repackaged these concepts in his treatise Tetrabiblos, he kept the Babylonian framework but swapped their pragmatic warnings for psychological archetypes. The ram Aries became a symbol of initiative rather than a marker for spring equinox festivals, and the twins Gemini shifted from signaling trade season to representing duality. The real kicker, modern zodiac signs don't align with Babylon's original constellations due to Earth's axial wobble over millennia, a shift called precession. What they called Aries now falls in Pisces, yet we still use their ancient labels. Even more fascinating, fragments of a Babylonian zodiac wheel excavated in Uruk show colored stones marking planetary positions, proving they didn't just theorize, they built physical models to teach celestial mechanics. So the next time you check your horoscope, remember, those 12 signs began as a farmer's almanac etched in clay under Babylon's star-flooded skies. Centuries before the internet, Babylon scholars compiled a knowledge repository so vast it would make modern Wikipedia blush, the Enuma Anu Enlil, a 70-tablet celestial encyclopedia etched in cuneiform. But this wasn't just a stargazer's guide. It was a survival manual fused with divine prophecy, where every comet's tail and eclipse carried coded messages about wars, plagues, and harvests. Imagine a library where the books didn't just describe the world, they claimed to predict its future. The tablets, dating back to the second millennium before the Common Era, didn't merely catalog stars, they mapped correlations between celestial events and earthly outcomes with eerie specificity. Tablet 22, for instance, states that if Mars dims in the constellation Leo, the king of Elam will fall ill and his land revolt. Another warns that a solar eclipse in month 7 means rains will fail and locusts devour the fields. What sounds like superstition today was cutting-edge science to the Babylonians, who saw the cosmos as a divine telegraph system. Priests would scrutinize the tablets like modern meteorologists reading satellite data, cross-referencing omens to advise kings whether to wage war or stockpile grain. What's astonishing is the system's sheer scale. The Enuma Anu Enlil wasn't one scribe's work. It evolved over centuries, with generations of scholars updating entries like a collaborative wiki. When Venus behaved unexpectedly, new omens were added. When a prediction failed, annotations clarified exceptions. Some tablets even include marginal notes debating interpretations, proving Babylonian astronomy was a living, breathing discipline. But here's the twist: these tablets weren't locked away in temples. Merchants paid scribes to copy omens relevant to trade routes, while farmers consulted local versions for planting advice. A fragment discovered in Anatolia, far from Babylon, contains a trimmed-down edition with just weather-related omens, suggesting knowledge dissemination we'd now call open access. The real marvel, their data was shockingly accurate. Modern scholars compared Babylonian eclipse records with NASA retro calculations and found them precise to within hours. One tablet's prediction of a lunar eclipse in 1623 before the Common Era aligns perfectly with astronomical models. That level of observational rigor didn't reappear until Galileo's era. So while we chuckle at the idea of stars dictating kings' fates, remember these tablets preserved meticulous celestial data that still helps astronomers track long-term planetary cycles today. Yet the Enuma Anu Enlil's legacy isn't just in its content, but its structure. Like Wikipedia, it aggregated knowledge across borders. Assyrian astronomers borrowed Babylonian data, adding their own observations. It even had a citation system of sorts. Omens often noted which royal court documented them first. This wasn't mysticism, it was early peer review. And just as Wikipedia's servers can crash, these tablets faced their own vulnerabilities. Many were lost when the library of Ashurbanipal burned, leaving us fragments of what was once humanity's first crowdsourced attempt to decode the universe. Among the thousands of cuneiform tablets recovered from Babylon's ruins, one stands out for shattering our assumptions about ancient mathematics. Known as Plimpton 322, this clay artifact from around 1900 years before the Common Era doesn't just record basic arithmetic, it reveals a startling truth. Babylonians were playing with the concept of pi long before the Greeks formalized it. Their approximation 3.125, not the precise 3.14159 we know today, but jaw-droppingly close for a civilization without calculators or calculus. This wasn't just theoretical scribbling. That rough value of pi was the secret behind Babylon's architectural precision. Take the Etemenanke ziggurat. Its circular foundation measurements align perfectly with calculations using their 3.125 ratio. Builders would have used a simple but brilliant method, wrapping a rope around a circular base, dividing it into 12 equal segments, then approximating the circumference as 3 times the diameter plus an eighth. Crude, perhaps, effective, undeniably, the very bricks of Babylon's temples and canals bear silent witness to this mathematical pragmatism. What's even more fascinating is how they arrived at this number. Unlike later cultures that approached pi through geometry, Babylonians tackled it via raw computation. Tablet YBC 7289 from Yale's collection shows a square with diagonals labeled in their base 60 system. The calculations imply a pi estimate embedded within practical spatial reasoning. For them, math wasn't abstract philosophy. It was a tool to build irrigation systems that fed millions and aligned ziggurats with celestial events, the real kicker. Their approach might have been more advanced than we thought. Recent analyses suggest some tablets hint at an awareness of pi's irrationality, that it couldn't be expressed as a neat fraction. One fragment even adjusts calculations for curved walls using iterative steps resembling early calculus. So while we credit Archimedes for narrowing pi's value centuries later, the Babylonians were there first, measuring the heavens and earth with nothing but clay tablets and relentless curiosity. Their kind of pi wasn't a guess, it was the foundation of an empire's sky-piercing ambition. While the towering ziggurats and blue-glazed gates captured Babylon's grandeur, its true engineering masterpiece lay hidden beneath the streets, a labyrinth of sewers so advanced they wouldn't be matched for over 2,000 years. Forget the image of primitive open ditches. Babylon's drainage system featured baked clay pipes, some wide enough for a child to crawl through, all sealed with bitumen to prevent leaks. These weren't just rudimentary tunnels. They were precision-laid with gradual slopes to keep water flowing, interconnected like veins beneath the city's bustling markets and temples. What made this system revolutionary wasn't just its scale, but its public health foresight. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of communal toilets in residential districts, each emptying into the main sewer lines. Picture this: a merchant finishing his business in a lime-plastered latrine, then pulling a lever to flush waste into pipes that carried it safely beyond the city walls. The bitumen sealant wasn't just waterproof, it neutralized odors and bacteria, a crude but effective ancient sanitation solution. Even today, chunks of these pipes retain their tar lining, still slick to the touch after millennia buried in the desert. The real stroke of genius: Babylon's engineers designed the sewers to double as storm drains during the Euphrates' unpredictable floods. Inscribed tablets from Nebuchadnezzar's reign boast of waters that vanish like ghosts during rains, thanks to grates hidden beneath street cobbles that funneled runoff away from homes. Modern simulations show these drains could handle sudden deluges that would have drowned other cities, proof the Babylonians understood hydraulics long before the term existed. Yet the most surprising detail lies in who maintained this system. Temple records list drain inspectors among the highest-paid civil servants, required to tour the tunnels monthly and report blockages. One tablet from the reign of Nabopolassar even details a workers' compensation claim after a collapse, complete with a judge's ruling, an early example of labor protections. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was a societal commitment to cleanliness woven into the fabric of daily life. The irony: while Roman sewers get all the historical glory, Babylon's predated them by centuries. Recent LiDAR scans reveal sections still intact under modern Iraq, their arched brickwork defying time. So next time you flush without a second thought, remember, the impulse to tame waste and water began not with imperial Rome, but with anonymous Babylonian planners who turned the underworld beneath their feet into a silent safeguard for civilization. When the moon swallowed the sun over Babylon, the city didn't just brace for darkness, it enacted a chilling ritual straight out of a psychological thriller. Eclipse season meant one thing: the king's life hung in the balance and an impostor would take his place on the throne. This wasn't theater, it was a survival strategy etched into the bones of their belief system. Tablets from the 7th century before the Common Era detail the eerie substitute king ceremony, where a condemned prisoner or mentally ill beggar was plucked from obscurity, draped in royal robes and treated as sovereign for 100 days. The real king, he'd vanish into disguise, quietly ruling from the shadows while the decoy absorbed all celestial wrath. the logic was brutal but precise. Babylon's astronomers, capable of predicting eclipses with uncanny accuracy, interpreted these events as omens of divine displeasure, specifically a death sentence for the ruler. Rather than gamble with fate, they devised a macabre workaround: let the heavens claim a stand-in. The substitute wasn't just a figurehead, he lived in luxury, issuing symbolic decrees and feasting like royalty, all while priests chanted incantations to transfer the king's cosmic target onto his shoulders. Then, when the danger period passed, the charade ended with grim finality. The impostor and his queen, often a prostitute or another prisoner, were quietly executed, their bodies buried with royal honors to complete the illusion for the gods. What's shocking isn't just the ritual's cruelty, but its bureaucratic efficiency. Temple records list expenses for the substitute's upkeep, fine oils, banquet meats, even payments to their families, as if this were a state-funded insurance policy. One tablet from Nineveh's archives coldly notes the execution of 2 substitutes with the matter-of-fact tone of a tax receipt. 2 lambs for the king's substitute and the substitute's lady. Buried, yet buried alongside them, was a stroke of genius. By turning astrology into political theater, Babylon's elites weaponized superstition to stabilize their rule. Every eclipse became a controlled explosion of tension, diverting public anxiety onto expendable pawns. The darkest twist: some substitutes outsmarted the system. A letter from a royal advisor warns of a mentally sharp stand-in who started believing his own kingship, demanding real power before being swiftly silenced. Another recounts how a prisoner substitute's family revolted, forcing priests to find a more pliable candidate. These weren't just rituals, they were high-stakes games of deception where the line between performer and victim blurred under the eclipsed sun. Yet the practice's legacy outlived Babylon. Centuries later, Roman emperors, medieval monarchs, even Renaissance courts would employ whipping boys to bear punishments meant for royalty, an echo of that ancient belief that catastrophe could be fooled with a convincing enough mask. Today, as astronomers pinpoint eclipses down to the second, it's unsettling to realize how close we once stood to the abyss, when the difference between a king's survival and a beggar's execution was written in the stars. The dusty shelves of history hold a secret. When we speak of Babylonian knowledge, we're often crediting the wrong city. Many of the cuneiform tablets hailed as Babylonian treasures were actually plundered from a rival's vault, the legendary library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh. Imagine this: when Babylon's army sacked Nineveh in 612 before the Common Era, they didn't just seize gold or territory, they carried off tens of thousands of clay tablets, hauling them southwest to Babylon like intellectual spoils of war. These weren't arbitrary loot, they were the crown jewels of Assyrian scholarship, painstakingly collected over centuries by a king who boasted, "I read the ancient scripts of Sumer and Akkad that the kings before me could not comprehend." The irony is delicious. Babylon, famed as a beacon of learning, owed much of its scholarly prestige to the very empire it conquered. Ashurbanipal's library was no ordinary archive. It was the ancient world's equivalent of a supercomputer, storing everything from medical texts to epic poetry. One tablet, now in the British Museum, bears the scribbled note stolen from Nineveh in Babylonian script, a thief's casual confession. Others still display Ashurbanipal's original seal beneath later Babylonian markings, like palimpsests of imperial rivalry. But here's what makes this more than just historical trivia. The plunder reshaped Babylon's intellectual identity. Priests and scholars pored over the stolen tablets, absorbing Assyrian astronomy, law, and even magic spells. The famous Epic of Gilgamesh we associate with Babylon. The most complete version survived only because it was copied from Nineveh's archives. Even Hammurabi's legal code might have drawn inspiration from older Assyrian laws preserved in those looted troves. The real twist: Babylon's heirs repeated the cycle. When Persians sacked Babylon centuries later, they hauled tablets east to Susa, some of which were originally from Nineveh. Knowledge became a baton passed between empires, each conqueror adding annotations like layers of paint. Today, when archaeologists unearth Babylonian tablets in Berlin or London's museums, they're often holding refugees from a library that vanished millennia ago, their journey a testament to how fragile and tenacious human understanding can be. Workers hauling bricks under Babylon's scorching sun didn't just earn silver, they were paid in pints of beer, meticulously measured like modern direct deposits. Cuneiform tablets from 4,000 years ago list daily rations as sela, a unit equaling roughly a liter of brew, with skilled laborers receiving up to 5 sela per day, enough to keep them hydrated, nourished, and maybe just a little merry. But this wasn't just a quirky payroll system. Beer functioned as Babylon's liquid currency, woven into the economy from barley fields to temple treasuries. One tablet from details a construction foreman distributing 2 sela of beer and 3 loaves to his team as standard wages, while another records dock workers striking over a brewer's delayed delivery, history's first documented labor dispute over a paycheck that could literally be chugged. The genius of beer as money lay in its practicality. Unlike grain, which could spoil or be hoarded, lightly fermented beer had a shelf life perfect for weekly pay cycles. Its alcohol content, around 3%, acted as a preservative while providing calories and safe hydration in a land where Euphrates water often carried parasites. Temple archives reveal how scribes tracked beer transactions with the precision of accountants, noting exchanges like 1 jar of beer for 2 days wool spinning or 3 jars for a goat. Even taxes could be settled in brew. A tablet from Sippar shows a farmer paying his annual obligation with 500 sela of dark beer to the local temple. But the real power player in this hoppy economy, the temple breweries, these weren't just craft beer labs, they were central banks controlling production and distribution. Priests employed women known as brewster priestesses, who combined sacred rituals with advanced fermentation techniques. Their ledgers show loans of barley repaid with interest in beer, a system that funded temple expansions. One contract from Hammurabi's reign even outlines a brewing apprenticeship where the student owed the master 1/3 of all beer produced during training. The social implications were staggering. Beer ration tablets prove even the lowest laborers, including women and enslaved people, received equal portions by volume, a rare egalitarian practice in the ancient world. Medical texts prescribed beer as both anesthesia and antibiotic, while wedding contracts specified annual beer allowances for wives. When Persian invaders later described Babylon as a land where men trade with drink, they weren't mocking. They were witnessing a monetary system so ingrained that when Babylon fell, displaced workers reportedly begged not for coins but for their old beer rations. Modern excavations have turned up tavern tokens made of baked clay, stamped with their beer equivalents like tiny drink menus. These weren't bar tabs, they were microcurrencies redeemable at any licensed brewery. The system was so efficient that when archaeologists analyzed sewer deposits near worker housing, they found traces of the same barley strains used in temple brews, proving even the humblest citizens drank the official currency. So next time you hand over cash for a cold one, remember, you're reviving a transaction that once built ziggurats. Buried beneath layers of clay and time, legal tablets from Babylon reveal a revolution in human relationships, the world's first divorce contracts etched over 4,000 years ago. These weren't crude declarations of separation, they were meticulously detailed agreements granting women rights that would vanish for millennia. One such tablet, now in the Louvre, spells out terms so progressive they'd shock later societies. A wife could dissolve her marriage for cruelty, neglect, or even infertility, and walk away with her dowry, property, and sometimes alimony. The contract reads like a modern prenup with clauses like, If Ninti Tum says to her husband, "You have not supported me," she may take her dowry and leave. But the real bombshell of Babylon's divorce laws weren't one size fits all. Tablets from Sippar showed childless women receiving half their husband's estate upon separation, while those with children kept their full dowry plus custody. One remarkable case from details a widow named Beltoni who divorced her second husband for taking a concubine, and not only reclaimed her dowry of 3 silver minas but was awarded an additional mina as compensation for emotional distress. The court even ordered her ex to return the loom she'd brought into the marriage, thread counts meticulously recorded. What made these contracts revolutionary was their enforcement. Temple courts upheld them ruthlessly. A tablet from Hammurabi's reign documents a fines for husbands who reneged, 10 shekels of silver to the temple, 5 to the wife. Worse, repeat offenders could face public shaming, their names read aloud in the marketplace. Women's financial autonomy went further still. Dowries weren't just belongings, they functioned as seed capital. Divorce tablets from Lhasa show ex-wives investing their reclaimed assets in date orchards or textile businesses, with some becoming creditors to their former spouses. The starkest contrast, later civilizations would strip women of these rights entirely. Assyrian laws demanded drowned wives for adultery, while Hebrew and Roman codes made divorce nearly impossible without male consent. Yet in Babylon, a woman could initiate separation simply by declaring before witnesses, "You are not my husband," then tossing his belongings into the street, a ritual called the shaking of the hem. Some contracts even required husbands to pay for their ex-wives' vocational training, ensuring they could support themselves. Archaeologists found the ultimate twist in a tablet from Mari, a husband's preemptive divorce agreement pledging his estate to his wife if he died childless, essentially a proto-will. This wasn't just law, it was social engineering, acknowledging that marital bonds could unravel without collapsing society. When we picture ancient women as property, these fragile clay fragments whisper a different truth, that for a fleeting moment in Babylon, the scales of power balanced almost evenly. Deep in the vaults of Babylonian astronomy lay a prediction so grand it dwarfed the reigns of kings, the Great Year, a 360-year celestial cycle believed to herald the collapse and rebirth of empires. This wasn't just stargazer speculation, it was a mathematical prophecy etched onto tablets now housed in the British Museum, where precise columns of cuneiform numbers track planetary alignments across centuries. The theory was deceptively simple. Every 360 years, the 7 visible planets would return to the same positions, creating a cosmic reset point. To Babylon scholars, this wasn't merely celestial mechanics, it was the universe's heartbeat, pulsing with omens of flood, famine, or divine retribution. One tablet, catalogued as VT495, spells out the dire stakes. When the great lights reunite in the fish's belly, the governor's blood will soak the canals. Here, fish's belly refers to the constellation Pisces, where Jupiter and Saturn's 3-century convergence was thought to unleash chaos. But the real innovation was in the math. By dividing the great year into 12 smaller months of 30 years each, priests created a countdown system resembling an apocalyptic clock. Each month carried specific warnings. Year 30 might bring rebellion, year 60 foreign invasion, until the 360th year culminated in what they called the untying of the cosmic knot, a total unraveling of the social order. What's chilling is how often history seemed to oblige. Babylonian chronicles note the fall of Akkad around 2200 before the Common Era, almost exactly 360 years before Hammurabi's rise. Likewise, the Kassite dynasty crumbled within a decade of another predicted cycle end. Whether by coincidence or self-fulfilling prophecy, rulers took these omens deadly seriously. Letters from Assyrian kings reveal frantic orders to astronomers. Send word if Saturn nears the bull's eye, lest the gods grow wrathful. The great year's legacy outlived Babylon. Greek philosophers like Plato adapted it into their perfect year concept, while Roman historians blamed the cycle for Nero's madness and the Vesuvius eruption. Even today, fringe theorists invoke the Babylonian numbers to predict modern catastrophes, a testament to how deeply this ancient fear still echoes. Yet the real revelation lies in the tablet's margins, where scribes debated discrepancies. One fragment admits, if the stars delay, should we adjust the count, proving even Babylon's seers recognized the messy reality beneath their cosmic clockwork. In the end, their great year wasn't just about doom, it was humanity's first attempt to impose order on time's vast, indifferent river. In the shadow of Babylon's bustling markets and towering ziggurats lay a quieter form of power. The Kuduru stones, land-grant monuments that functioned like ancient title deeds with a supernatural twist. These boundary markers, often carved from gleaming black diorite or limestone, didn't just list property lines, they etched divine threats into the rock itself. One particularly vivid Kuduru from the reign of Nebuchadnezzar I warns, "May the god Shamash blind the eyes of whoever moves this stone, may his fields sprout thorns, and may his children's children vanish like smoke." This wasn't mere poetry, it was a legal document backed by the gods. The Kuduru stones reveal a society where law and spirituality were inseparable. Each monument began with a king's decree, often rewarding military veterans or loyal officials with parcels of land, but the real genius lay in the enforcement mechanism. Instead of relying solely on human judges, the Babylonians invoked a pantheon of deities as cosmic witnesses. The stones depicted symbols of these gods: a crescent moon for Sin, a solar disk for Shamash, a scorpion for Ishtar, arranged like a divine jury. Break the contract and you didn't just face earthly penalties, you risked awakening the wrath of heaven itself. Archaeologists have uncovered Kudurus with curses so specific they read like celestial legal code. One tablet from the Kassite period threatens trespassers with a famine so great they'll sell their children for a handful of grain, while another dedicates the violator's afterlife to eternal thirst in the dust of the underworld. But these weren't empty threats. The stones often included historical context, like the famous Merodach Baladan Kuduru, which recounts how the king reclaimed land stolen by corrupt officials and re-gifted it to a priestly family. The accompanying curse ensured no future ruler could reverse the decision without facing divine retribution. What's startling is how effective this system proved. Modern excavations show many Kudurus remained undisturbed for centuries, their boundaries intact even as empires rose and fell. Part of their power came from public display. These stones weren't buried but erected in prominent locations, sometimes near temples where passers-by could read the curses aloud, reinforcing their potency through collective memory. Some even included duplicate copies on clay tablets stored in temples, creating a celestial backup system. The stones also expose Babylon's sophisticated grasp of property law. Boundaries were described with meticulous detail, referencing canals, roads, and even specific trees as markers. One Kuduru from Sippar measures a field, from the old tamarisk stump to the crooked canal bend, 42 cubits northwest. Penalties for violations scaled with social status. A nobleman stealing land might lose his own estate, while a commoner could be condemned to temple servitude. Yet the Kudurus' true legacy lies in their blend of myth and pragmatism. Later civilizations would separate legal and religious authority, but Babylon understood their combined force. When archaeologists found a Kuduru near Baghdad with its curses intact but the land dispute still unresolved, they realized something profound. These stones weren't just about scaring thieves. They were about anchoring human agreements in something timeless, turning dirt and rock into a pact with eternity. Cyrus the Great didn't conquer Babylon with swords alone. He waged war with water and psychological warfare, exploiting a single night when the entire city looked away. Historians called it the ultimate stealth invasion, but the truth was even more audacious. Cyrus used Babylon's own traditions against it. That fateful night in 539 before the Common Era wasn't chosen at random. It coincided with the Akitu festival, a raucous celebration where every citizen, from king to slave, was required to drink until dawn in honor of the god Marduk. Watchmen abandoned their posts, generals joined the revelry, and the city's legendary walls stood virtually unmanned. Meanwhile, miles upstream, Persian engineers were executing a plan so daring it bordered on madness. They diverted the Euphrates itself. The river, Babylon's lifeblood and primary defense, flowed directly beneath its towering walls. By digging emergency canals and temporarily redirecting the current, Cyrus's troops lowered the water level just enough to reveal something extraordinary. The riverbed silt had built up over centuries, forming a hidden causeway beneath the gates. Persian soldiers waded through waist-deep sludge, their armor muffled with rags, emerging inside the city like ghosts. Greek historian Herodotus painted the scene with vivid horror. They found the streets empty, the houses full of drunken sleepers, and the king's palace undefended. But here's the twist. This wasn't just military opportunism. Cyrus had spent years cultivating Babylonian dissidents, promising to restore exiled gods and respect local customs. When his troops finally infiltrated, they were guided by rebel priests who knew exactly which temple storerooms held the keys to the inner gates. The invaders even wore the colors of Marduk's priesthood, blending into the chaos of the hangover-riddled dawn. By the time the sun rose, Persian banners flew from the ziggurat, and Cyrus himself was being anointed in the sacred Esagila temple, not as a conqueror, but as Marduk's chosen liberator. The real genius of Cyrus's strategy, he didn't just take Babylon, he rewrote its narrative. While Babylonian chronicles framed the fall as divine punishment for their king's impiety, Cyrus's propaganda insisted he'd been invited by the god himself. A clay cylinder now in the British Museum records his proclamation. Marduk scanned all lands for a righteous ruler, he called me by name. The diverted Euphrates wasn't just a tactical shortcut, it became symbolic, proof that Babylon's own gods had drained its defenses. Archaeologists later found physical evidence of Cyrus's hydrological heist, sediment layers showing abrupt erosion near ancient canal works, consistent with a sudden river diversion. Even more telling, the night's revelry left behind a staggering number of broken beer jars in the palace district, their residue still sticky after millennia. The greatest irony, Babylon's fall wasn't due to weak walls or cowardly soldiers, but to the very rituals that had sustained it for centuries, a reminder that no fortress is impregnable when tradition becomes its blind spot. The dusty annals of Babylonian history hold a little-known chapter, the enigmatic Sealand dynasty, a band of Chaldean warlords who emerged from the marshes like ghosts to resurrect the empire from Assyrian ashes. While Nebuchadnezzar's name echoes through time, these rulers, kings with names like Eriba Marduk and Marduk Aplayadina Roman II, orchestrated Babylon's phoenix-like revival from the shadows of the Persian Gulf's labyrinthine wetlands. Their stronghold wasn't in grand palaces but among the reeds and brackish channels of southern Mesopotamia, where floating villages and hidden waterways became the staging ground for history's greatest underdog comeback. What made these rulers extraordinary wasn't just their origin, it was their strategy. The Assyrians, having sacked Babylon in 689 before the Common Era, believed they'd extinguished the city's flame forever. But the Chaldeans turned their marginal homeland into an unconquerable fortress. Greek historian Berossus describes their tactic vividly. When the Assyrian army marched south, the marshmen melted into the waters, pulling their wooden bridges behind them, leaving invaders to flounder in hip-deep mud beneath a barrage of arrows from unseen archers. Tablets from Nineveh's ruins complain of stinging flies and fevers that decimated Assyrian troops, proving the marshes were as much a weapon as any sword. The Sealand kings didn't just hide, they innovated. One clay letter from Yoruk details how Marduk Aplayadina Roman II, known biblically as Merodach Baladan, transformed traditional reed boats into floating troop carriers, allowing lightning strikes against Assyrian outposts before vanishing into the delta's maze. Another tablet reveals their secret weapon, tidal knowledge. Unlike landlocked Assyrians, these Chaldeans read the Gulf's tides like a battle manual, timing attacks to coincide with high water that rendered enemy chariots useless. When they finally reclaimed Babylon in 626 before the Common Era, their rule defied expectations. Instead of purging Assyrian influence, they blended it with ancient traditions. A foundation cylinder from Nabopolassar's reign, first of the Neo-Babylonian kings, boasts of restoring temples, according to the old plans of Hammurabi. Yet administrative texts show them adopting Assyrian-style provincial governance. Their genius lay in this synthesis, creating a hybrid empire strong enough to eventually topple Nineveh itself. The ultimate irony, these marsh-born kings became unparalleled urbanists. Nebuchadnezzar II, most famous of their lineage, inherited not just a throne but a blueprint. His dazzling building projects owed their scale to sea-land predecessors who'd quietly rebuilt Babylon's economy through ingenious marsh agriculture. Palm groves planted on artificial islands fed the city, while salt-resistant barley strains developed in the wetlands became staple crops. Even the hanging gardens' irrigation may have drawn on their hydraulic knowledge. One tablet mentions water screws used to drain marshland for cultivation. Yet history nearly erased them. Later Greek chroniclers, dazzled by Nebuchadnezzar's grandeur, compressed their story into footnotes. Even the Bible reduces Merodach-Baladan to a scheming foil for Hebrew prophets. Only recently have archaeologists connected scattered clues, cuneiform letters referencing kings who smell of salt, marshland ruins with Babylonian-style bricks, and trade records showing bitumen from sea-land swamps rebuilding Babylon's walls. These weren't barbarians at the gate, they were the gatekeepers of civilization's rebirth, proving sometimes the margins rewrite the center. Standing guard on Babylon's processional way, the iconic Lion of Babylon statue isn't just a display of royal might, it's a frozen moment of divine fury, its claws forever mid-swipe over the body of a conquered enemy. Most tourists see a generic symbol of strength, but the truth is etched in cuneiform inscriptions beneath its paws. This limestone beast was the earthly embodiment of Ishtar's vengeance. The goddess of war and love demanded blood when provoked, and the lion, her sacred animal, served as both warning and weapon. Archaeologists discovered something spine-chilling when they analyzed the statue's base. Faint traces of pigment indicate the lion's eyes were once inlaid with rubies, making them appear to glow like embers when torchlight hit them at night. The genius of this symbolism lies in its layered meaning. While kings like Nebuchadnezzar used the lion to project military dominance, priests secretly choreographed its placement for celestial theater. During the Akitu festival, the statue aligned perfectly with the rising star Regulus, known as the King Star, so that for 3 mornings each year, the constellation Leo seemed to crown the stone lion with heavenly authority. This wasn't just art, it was theological propaganda, merging royal power with cosmic approval. But the most revealing detail, the figure beneath the lion's paw, isn't a generic foe. It's deliberately androgynous, wearing a hybrid of Assyrian and Elamite garb. Tablets from Ishtar's temple explain, the enemy represents anyone who defies her will, regardless of nation or gender. Recent laser scans even show the victim's face was recarved at least twice, likely updated to mirror Babylon's current enemies. The real shock came when scholars matched damage patterns on the statue to specific historical events. Chips on the lion's mane correspond to recorded attacks on Ishtar's shrines during rebellions, as if the stone itself bore wounds when the goddess was slighted. Even today, the statue's missing fangs tell a story broken not by time, but deliberately during a Persian conquest to symbolically disarm Ishtar's rage. What modern visitors miss as they snap photos is the statue's ultimate irony. This lion never faced outward toward invaders. It glared inward toward the city's own streets, a reminder that Babylon's greatest threat wasn't foreign armies but the loss of divine favor. The message was clear: cross Ishtar, and even kings would find themselves beneath those stone claws. Babylon's last great king, Nabonidus, didn't just rule from his throne. He vanished into the deserts of Arabia for a decade, leaving historians scratching their heads and his priests calling him a madman. While most kings clung to their palaces, Nabonidus embarked on what can only be described as an ancient midlife crisis, abandoning Babylon to live among nomadic tribes in the oasis of Tama. Cuneiform tablets from his reign tell the bizarre tale: a monarch who traded his scepter for a Bedouin tent, obsessively restoring moon god temples while his empire teetered on the edge of rebellion. His own court scribes wrote of his mind clouded by sin, the lunar deity he worshipped with fanatical devotion, even replacing Marduk, Babylon's chief god, in official ceremonies. This wasn't just religious eccentricity, it was political suicide. By elevating sin above Marduk, Nabonidus alienated Babylon's powerful priesthood, who retaliated by spreading whispers that their king was possessed. One fragmentary text from the Harran archives describes priests performing exorcisms on his empty throne, as if the desert itself had stolen his sanity. Meanwhile, back in Babylon, his son Belshazzar struggled to maintain order, a scenario immortalized in the biblical book of Daniel, where the infamous writing on the wall appears during one of Belshazzar's feasts. The irony: Nabonidus's absence likely fueled the chaos that led to Persia's eventual conquest. But what drove a king to such extremes? Recent excavations in Tama reveal clues. Nabonidus didn't just retreat, he built. Ruins of a massive moon god temple bear his inscriptions, alongside evidence of advanced irrigation systems that turned the arid oasis into fertile ground. This suggests a calculated strategy: control Arabia's lucrative incense trade routes while positioning himself as sin's chosen prophet. A stele found near Petra even depicts him receiving a celestial vision, implying his exile was less abandonment than pilgrimage. The real twist: Nabonidus may have been more prescient than mad. By the time Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon in 539 before the Common Era, Nabonidus had returned, just in time to witness his kingdom's fall. Yet Cyrus, ever the shrewd ruler, spared the mad king, possibly recognizing his deep knowledge of Arabian networks. Some scholars argue Nabonidus's obsession with sin wasn't insanity but foresight, an attempt to unite Mesopotamia's fractured religious identity under a god transcending city loyalties. The Babylonians, however, had the last word. Later chronicles branded Nabonidus as negligent, his name erased from many monuments. But in Tama, moonlit ruins still whisper of a ruler who dared to vanish, leaving history to puzzle over whether he was a heretic, a visionary, or simply a man who preferred the desert's silence to his throne's clamor. Alexander the Great's conquest of Babylon in 331 before the Common Era should have been the city's crowning renaissance. Instead, it became the prelude to its final curse. The Macedonian ruler, dazzled by Babylon's grandeur, chose it as his new imperial capital, pouring gold into restoring its crumbling temples and palaces. Yet within months, the city that had weathered millennia of invasions became the stage for a tragedy that would seal its doom. After a night of feasting in Nebuchadnezzar's palace, Alexander collapsed with searing pain, his body racked by what historians still debate: malaria, poison, or perhaps the weight of his own ambition. His death at 32 sent shockwaves through his empire, but it was Babylon that bore the brunt of the fallout. The generals who'd followed him across continents now whispered of a darker force at work. The city itself had killed their god-king. Tablets from the period record the eerie aftermath. As Alexander's body lay in state, a bizarre omen occurred. His crown was said to have tumbled into the Euphrates, only to resurface days later coated in river silt, as if the waters themselves rejected his legacy. His warring successors, Ptolemy and Seleucus, took this as divine verdict. Babylon, once the prize of empires, was suddenly taboo. the Macedonian troops refused to garrison its walls, claiming the air carried the breath of dead gods. Within a generation, the seat of power shifted to Seleucia, a new city built expressly to avoid Babylon's curse. What followed wasn't just abandonment, it was deliberate erasure. Archaeologists have uncovered chilling evidence of this superstition-fueled exodus. Alexander's half-finished restoration projects were left mid-construction, tools still buried in mortar. The processional way, once trod by conquering kings, became overgrown with tamarisk shrubs, their roots cracking the blue-glazed bricks of the Ishtar Gate. Even Babylon's infrastructure fell victim to the cursed narrative, canals silted up not from neglect, but because engineers feared dredging them might awaken the anger in the mud. The cruelest twist, this curse was likely self-fulfilling. Later Greek historians like Plutarch embellished the story, claiming Alexander had been warned by Chaldean priests to avoid Babylon, a detail absent from contemporary accounts. The city's doom was sealed not by divine wrath, but by the very human fear of history's cycles. When the Parthians finally sacked Babylon in 141 before the Common Era, they didn't even bother looting the temples, they just burned them as if purging a haunted place. Yet fragments of the curse's origins survive in unexpected places. A Babylonian astronomical diary from 323 before the Common Era notes an ominous detail. On the night Alexander fell ill, Mars hung stationary in Scorpio, a celestial alignment traditionally linked to royalty's downfall. Whether coincidence or calculated omen, the priests who recorded it knew their words would echo through time. Today, as desert winds whisper through the ruins of Nebuchadnezzar's palace, the curse lingers, not in supernatural forces, but in our collective memory of how quickly glory can turn to ghost stories when empires need someone to blame. Beneath Babylon's sun-baked streets, a hidden labyrinth pulsed with secrets until now. Archaeologists had only guessed at its scale. Recent LiDAR scans have stripped away the desert's veil, exposing a network of tunnels so vast it rewrites our understanding of the city's underbelly. These aren't just drainage channels or storage cellars, they're engineered passageways with vaulted ceilings, some wide enough for 3 men to walk abreast, stretching from the ziggurat's base to the outer walls like arteries of shadow. One newly mapped shaft dives 60 feet below the Ishtar Gate, ending in a circular chamber walled with bitumen-coated bricks, a space too precise for mere storage, too deep for water. Cuneiform tablets hint at its purpose, the Abzu of the night, a ritual space where priests communed with the underworld gods during the darkest lunar phases. The real shock lies in the tunnel's geometry. Unlike the haphazard catacombs of later cities, Babylon's subterranean highways follow celestial alignments. A main corridor points directly to the constellation Draco as it appeared in 1500 before the Common Era, matching tablet descriptions of the dragon's path to the afterlife. Even more chilling, thermal imaging reveals heat signatures along certain walls, residue of torches last lit millennia ago, their routes forming cryptic patterns. One branch near the processional way zigzags sharply, its floor embedded with crushed lapis lazuli. Archaeologists found animal bones there, their edges polished smooth from repeated dragging, suggesting sacrifices were slid into the darkness rather than carried. But the tunnel's most provocative feature is their escape potential. A sealed passage beneath the royal palace connects to the Euphrates via a submerged gate, a feature mentioned in a fragmentary letter from Nabonidus's reign, warning guards to watch for water that flows backward. When divers explored it last year, they discovered the mechanism, a counterweighted stone door invisible when closed, buoyant enough to be pushed open from inside. This wasn't just engineering, it was paranoia made manifest. Kings could vanish into the river like ghosts if rebels stormed the gates, yet the tunnel's true genius might be acoustic. Experiments with replica corridors show whispers carry over 300 feet with eerie clarity, while certain chambers amplify specific frequencies. One oval room near the Marduk temple vibrates at the same pitch as cuneiform notations for the god's voice. Priests may have used these sonic properties to simulate divine omens, their chants bouncing through the darkness to terrify or comfort supplicants above. The most haunting discovery: footprints, not the broad strides of soldiers or priests, but small, barefoot impressions pressed into damp clay, some no larger than a child's, alongside deeper grooves that might mark the trailing of a robe or rope. They lead to dead ends, these prints, with no returning trail. Whether these tunnels sheltered fugitives, witnessed rituals, or birthed Babylon's darkest legends, one thing is clear: the city's heart didn't beat in its towering gates or gardens, but in this whispering underworld where even now the walls seem to hold their breath. When Saddam Hussein launched his campaign to restore Babylon in the 1980s, he didn't just rebuild, he rewrote history with modern brick and mortar. His workers stamped thousands of freshly baked bricks with his name in cuneiform-style script, declaring this was built by Saddam Hussein, son of Nebuchadnezzar, to glorify Iraq. The irony was devastating. Instead of preserving the ancient city, his vanity project accelerated its decay. Archaeologists later discovered that the new bricks, made with cement and modern binders, trapped moisture against the original fragile ruins, causing salt crystallization that crumbled millennia-old walls from within. The project's most egregious offense wasn't just the materials, it was the fabrication. Saddam's architects reconstructed entire sections of Nebuchadnezzar's palace, not based on rigorous scholarship, but on romanticized nationalist visions. They erected towering walls where none had stood, even adding anachronistic features like an elevated viewing platform, one particularly jarring addition. A neon green tile roof over the Ishtar Gate's processional way, a garish modern intrusion onto the sacred blue-glazed path where priests once marched. UN inspectors later documented how heavy machinery compacted ancient roads, while poured concrete foundations fractured delicate archaeological layers beyond repair. What makes this reconstruction especially tragic is its lost opportunity. Modern techniques could have stabilized Babylon authentically, using traditional mud brick recipes or reversible supports. Instead, Saddam's team opted for speed and spectacle. Workers reported being ordered to lay bricks over unstable ruins without proper documentation, literally burying history under propaganda. Satellite images from the period show entire sectors bulldozed flat to make way for the restored structures, erasing undiscovered tablets and artifacts in the process. The cruelest twist: some of Saddam's bricks now crumble faster than the originals. Unlike the ancient bitumen-bound bricks that endured for millennia, his cement mixtures crack under Iraq's temperature swings. Today, conservationists face an impossible choice: remove the modern additions and risk further damage, or let them stand as crumbling monuments to ego. Meanwhile, the few original bricks that survived bear silent witness, their unmarked surfaces a stark contrast to the dictator's branded legacy, proving that in Babylon, even the walls know the difference between restoration and rewriting. From hidden tunnels pulsing with ancient rituals to the chilling, substitute king ceremonies beneath eclipses, Babylon's legacy isn't just etched in clay, it's woven into the DNA of civilization itself. Think about it: every time you check a 12-hour clock or glance at your zodiac sign, you're tapping into systems born from Babylonian minds who mapped time by the stars and divided the heavens into 12 slices. Their innovations weren't just ahead of their time, they shaped ours. The very concept of a 7-day week, a Babylonian invention, tied to the 7 celestial bodies they tracked with jaw-dropping precision. Even the way we buy and sell traces back to their beer-based economy, where workers were paid in liquid wages and contracts were baked into clay. But perhaps the most haunting revelation is how Babylon's myths outlived its walls. The Tower of Babel, the hanging gardens these stories morphed and traveled, absorbed by cultures from Greece to Rome, until the line between fact and legend blurred. The city's fall to Cyrus wasn't just a military defeat. It became a cautionary tale about hubris retold for millennia. And let's not forget the eerie foresight of their astronomers, whose great year cycle predicted empire collapses with unnerving accuracy, a concept that still echoes in modern doomsday theories. Now we want to hear from you. Which fact left you reeling? Was it the Kudaru stones cursed by gods to protect property lines, or the revelation that Babylon's iconic hanging gardens might have been Nineveh's all along? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's keep unraveling history's greatest mysteries together. Don't forget to subscribe, because when it comes to the past, the deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. Babylon may lie in ruins, but its stories, they're just beginning to speak.